All right, welcome to the costing class, ladies and gentlemen. We meet once again for, I hope this is your favorite module. I'm just hoping this is your favorite module. But if it is not, I'm hoping by the end of this semester, this is going to be your favorite module. All right, so this was assignment number 1, assessment number 1, due on the 21st of August, 2023 for costing. Right, so remember, this was not exactly a requirement if you are doing MAC 3761, but because costing is costing, we are basically being examined round about the same things anyway. So it's always important that whatever we do on that side, we also do on this side. So hence, we are covering just about the same things here. All right. But I'm only going to be highlighting the important things, things that I feel like were okay, not tricky because nothing was tricky here, but things that I feel like maybe we need to pay special attention to, right? Particularly with the theory behind some of the solutions. So before I forget, let me just post the solutions to the other group so that in your practice, so why we post those solutions is so that in your practice, you compare the answers that we have there on the solution against what you have written, right? Or at least try and get the thought process behind the workings that we are giving and the workings that we're giving and the solutions, etc., just to see what's going on there. All right, so on question number 1, the budgeted fixed manufacturing overheads allocation rate per direct labor clock hour for 2023 financial year. So in the previous session, I think we were dealing with this, right? In the previous session, I think we were dealing with this. So I'm not going to get into much detail on this, but except again to emphasize that take note of the fact that you need manufacturing overheads. What kind of manufacturing overheads? Fixed manufacturing overheads. So those are the ones that you are fetching. So in a normal setup, you'll be having a lot of information. And then from that information, you need to look for the budgeted fixed manufacturing overheads. Right? So that part is usually straightforward, except that you might mistakenly mix up your overheads. By that I mean take, say, maybe your administration overheads and link them up with that, or maybe not take budgeted, go for the actual by mistake. So you need to watch out for that. Sorry, I'm gonna pause a little bit. I need to take a small call. All right, so sometimes you might take actual material, so actual manufacturing overheads instead of budgeted. So always take note of that. And then in terms of the direct labor clock hour, again, most of the workings will be similar to what we did in the previous example. So just go through also that class and then perfect your knowledge by attempting this here. So if you are doing MAC 3761, just check the solution in the group there, but we will be referring to it just now. So since you are dealing with budgeted, put your focus on the standard there, forget the actual, right? So what you need now, you need the hours, the total hours, right? The standard hours, the total budgeted hours. So those hours are going to be based on the number of units that you are going to produce. So hence we're saying in the calculation there should be 120 divided by 60, and then you are multiplying that by 28,000, which should be the number of units. And then for the other product, it was 30,000. So you always add up these two because you need the total, because you are in any case dealing here with, this total here. These are total fixed manufacturing overheads. Then here, again, the reason why we multiplied by 12 was because I think it was monthly, right? It was monthly, right? So we want to deal with this for the financial year. So we're given that one per monthly. The budgeted units here is for the whole year, I believe. Yeah. So that is why That is why we got the solutions that we got there. So that one, I think I can't overemphasize on that one, but just go through again and check. Right, and then with this one here, the total fixed manufacturing overheads amount included in the cost of sales. Right. So what you are doing here, you are basically talking about the amount that needs to be applied there. The amount that basically needs to be applied. So remember, we're talking about over applied and under applied the other time. So here, this is where your starting point is. You start off by applying, right? So which you are basically taking your OAR, that one. So we also need to be watching out for these questions. Sometimes we might have to carry over our answer from one, right? To use the answer that we got on one to carry it over to question 2. But in some cases, they will state that for this question alone, please assume the OAR is 80 Rand per hour, right? So the only thing that you needed to check, right? The only thing that you really needed to check here was, of course, the fact that you are dealing with actual production, right? You are dealing with actual production. So we basically want to see the actual hours that were expended towards this production. So you are basically going to be taking these actual hours, 25,000, and then making use of this 108 and this 156. So you only make use of the budgeted information when coming up with the OAR. So once you've gotten the OAR, you then take that rate and you apply it with the actual level of activity. Maybe in this instance, our level of activity was the clock hours, right? So that's what you basically do. So you will realize now that on the next one, why are people now calling me so much? Because I'm in class. Okay, let me say I'll call you back. We'll call shortly after. No one really calls me during the day. They want to call when I'm in class. Okay, somebody's struggling to join. Let me see. Okay, no. Everybody's in. All right, so hence you will realize, can I just, I need to blow this up a little bit. Right, so you will realize that now we are making use of 108 and 156, right? Why are we doing that? Because we want to find the actual hours that we incurred, right? So hence here I said fixed manufacturing overheads absorbed. So you can either say absorbed or applied, right? So we want to find the actual. So we need to base that on the actual production, 25,000, and the actual hours that it took for us to deal with that production. So that's basically going to give you the actual hours, right? So once you get the actual hours, you then multiply those actual hours by 80 Rand, then you will get the fixed overheads that are included in the cost of sales. So remember what we're saying the last time, I think it's probably on this next question. Okay, so, all right, there we go. Now on the next question, they're saying, suppose the rate is 70 Rand. Right, let's ignore that 80 Rand for a while. Calculate the total over or under absorption. Right, this we also dealt with in the first class. Right, so remember the reasons that I was giving, that when we are dealing with, the reason why we use budgeted information is because during the course of the year, we don't really have access to the actual fixed costs that we will incur by the end of the year. We don't know because it's still during the year, but we need this information, 70 Rand per hour, to help us to cost ourselves. So hence, the previous question was saying what amount is included in the cost of sales, right? So the cost of sales is basically the cost of inventory that you have sold. So you need to value that inventory during the year. You see, so your best bet is to make use of your budgeted information, right? So in the instance that your budgeted information is not the same as your actual information, which you find out when you're now doing your financials at the end of the period, So in the instance that there is a difference there, it results in an over or under absorption. So absorption basically means the fixed cost that you've included in your inventory valuation, so which is your cost of sales. So it's the fixed cost in terms of your fixed manufacturing cost that you have applied or absorbed or included in your inventory or cost of sales. So that can either be less than or more than, you see. Sometimes it's the same, but usually there's gonna be a discrepancy. There's gonna be a variance there between those two amounts. So hence you're gonna have an over and an under absorption there. So which is what we want to calculate there. So the first thing to calculate is how much was absorbed, right? We first need to calculate how much was absorbed, and then you compare what was absorbed with actual, right? To see what the difference is there. So how do you get what was absorbed? You basically do what we did on the previous question. So you take your 70 Rand and you multiply that 70 Rand by the actual hours, right? So which is what I believe we did here. Where is that now? Okay, it's right here. So all this here, this is the units, and then we know that per unit, it's 108 minutes, but you want to convert that to hours, right? So which was 108 divided by 60, you multiply that by 25,000. So if you're having trouble with this, you just need practice and you just need to go to the previous video, right? So this is the same that we did. So we are doing all this part here to basically find out how many hours did we spend producing these two goods, right? Or these two products. How many hours did we use there? And then once you get the number of hours, you know, therefore, that per hour, we are saying our OAR is 70 Rand, overhead absorption rate. It's 70 Rand. So you multiply your 70 Rand. So which means in your cost of sales, this is what was put in there, included in your value of inventory as your fixed manufacturing overheads. But the year is now over. We know that our actual fixed manufacturing overheads were 9,200. So which means that we absorbed more than what we actually incurred. So hence it's over absorption or over applying, you see. So which means included in our inventory or in our cost of sales is an over, right? We over applied. So hence, so cost of sales, you must remember your cost of sales is an expense, right? It's deducted from your sales. So cost of sales is an expense. So which means if your cost of sales have been overstated, right? Though I shouldn't exactly use the word overstated. Let's just say they've been over-absorbed, right? If your cost of sales reflect that there's been over-absorption of your fixed manufacturing overheads, then it means you need to credit the amount. Your expenses have got a debit. So if you are reducing your expenses, you do a credit. So which is why there we put it in as a credit. But like I indicated the last time, most of what we'll be doing here would be your financial statement, your income statement. So on your income statement, you just put that as an addition either to your sales amount or a deduction. I prefer it to be an addition to your sales amount. So you basically have your sales, less cost of sales, which is negative, and then you have your over absorption there, which is going to be a positive. So once you take your sales and then you deduct from your sales cost of sales, then you add your over absorption, then you get your gross profit from there. Right. But as per this question, we simply wanted you to say whether it's a credit or a debit. So if it's a debit, it means there would have been an under absorption. So this amount here would be less than 9,200. So that would make that an under absorption. Right. So the next time we are going to be dealing with this, ladies and gentlemen, someone is going to be doing a question. Right? Someone is going to be doing a question. And then this is the other interesting one. So if you check also on the first video, which I believe I said I did that video last semester, I think we talked about direct costs and indirect costs, right? So we say direct costs can be assigned, right? Can easily be assigned to products, right? You know that this leather was for shoes, this leather was for belts. If you're manufacturing shoes and belts, right? You know that this is the leather that you bought for shoes, this is the leather that you bought for for belts, right? So it's easy, they can easily be assigned. This is the labor, direct labor can easily be assigned that, okay, person A, person B worked on the belt, the next person worked on the shoes. That's very easy. So those are your direct costs that can easily be assigned. But your indirect costs, on the other hand, cannot easily be assigned. So what do we do? The word there is allocate, right? We allocate them. So which is more of arbitrary allocation, because there's no direct relationship that can be established. So we merely come up with an assumed relationship. So there is the APC method that we can use, which is this one here, the activity-based method, or we could make use of the traditional method. So the traditional method is exactly what we did on the questions above. We're using the traditional method, right? So which means once you have the OAR, the overhead absorption rate, you basically go and fetch how much or how many direct clock hours were for product A, how many direct clock hours were for product B. So you use that to allocate your fixed cost between products, right? So this is an issue because costing in this instance here, costing in particular, because this is management accounting and cost accounting, right? Cost accounting, when we're dealing with the costing of items, the costing of inventory, we want to know the cost of an item. Say, if you have inventory A, B, C, D, or products A, B, C, D. So we want to know how much it costs the organization to make product A, product B, or product C, or end product C. We need to know all that information for decision making, right? So in so doing, we said direct costs can be assigned easily. So you will know these are the direct costs that you incurred for A, for B, for C. But indirect costs, how would you know if it's depreciation for a machine that is shared between all the products, you see? So which is where now you can either make use of the traditional method or the APC method. So the traditional method basically assumes a single OAR for all the products, right? Based on a certain level of activity. So the level of activity that we're dealing with in the prior questions was we're dealing with labor hours, direct labor hours, right? But the APC wants to establish a cause-effect relationship, right? So which is where now we come up with what we call cost drivers. So we are saying, what is the biggest cost driver or biggest influencer of a certain fixed cost or a certain portion of the fixed cost? Then we use that to assign between products in terms of how much does this product consume, how much does the other product consume. A simple example would be, let's look at general overheads here and floor space. So it's like if you're manufacturing and you have got 100 square meters, right, in terms of floor space. One product only occupies 10 square meters while the other occupies 90 square meters. So it doesn't really make sense for you to use another method for a product that occupies 10 square meters to incur more general overheads than a product that incurs 90 square meters. So which is where this cost driver thing makes sense, right? So this is it here. So administrative, so they're not exactly going to ask you much theory on this except for the differences between your APC and your traditional. Just go through, I think the video there talks about the advantages of one method, which are going to be the disadvantages of the other method, by the way. So when you are stuck in the exam and you can't remember what is what, so just remember the advantages of both. Then you definitely get the disadvantages of the other, right? It's going to be easier that way. But your wording, of course, needs to be smart, right? You mustn't show the examiners that you are guessing, right? Or you are taking shortcuts. Don't show them that. All right, so these are the costs here and these are the cost drivers. So this is just ratios here that we are dealing with. It's just mathematics, nothing difficult there. Okay, so I had to basically do the whole thing. So we have our fixed costs here separated into admin, cleaning, marketing, and general overhead. So they are separated like that. That's the total of them. So we basically want to allocate, right? We basically want to allocate these fixed costs between different cost units there, right? We want to allocate that. So these could be products, this could be anything. So in our case, we are dealing with the conference, hotel, and venue. So we want to know how much fixed costs can we allocate to conference, how much fixed costs can we allocate to hotel, and venue likewise. All right, so as for this part here, there are several ways in which you can do that, right? There are several ways this can be done, but I was basically using Excel so I to find the quickest way so I could put up my answers there quickly, right? But what you basically do, you look at your administrative staff salaries and then what's the cost driver, right? You go and check the cost driver. So the allocation rate for that is going to be based on the number of bookings, right? It's going to be based on the number of bookings. So in total, the number of bookings there is 6,000. All right, let me just show you where I'm getting all that from. All right, the number of bookings is going to be that plus that plus that, right? So the total of 3,840 plus 1,200 plus 960 is going to give you that amount there. We said it's what, 6,000, yeah? Right. So you are basically going to be assigning, or allocating is the word, sorry. You are going to be allocating based on this ratio, right? 960 is to 1,200 is to 3,840. So the first thing to do is to total that up. So which is what we did there. You get our total, 6,000. So which means the rate now for conference, you take your 960 and you divide by 6,000. It's going to give you 0.16. Then 0.16, you got your amount there, which is 2,100. So 0.16 times 2,100 is going to, sorry, 2,100,000 is going to give you the portion that goes for the conference. And then for hotel, it's 1,200 divided by 6,000, which is the total, right? So if I was writing this without Excel, like if I was writing it on a paper, right, without typing this, I'll just put it as 1,200 divided by 6,000 times 2,100,000. I'll just put it like that. So this here I put up just to help me with calculations here, right? I didn't want to start with these calculations. And then on the venue, it's going to be 3,840 divided by 6,000 times 2,000, so 2,100,000. That's what you basically do there. All right, so, and then on the cleaning staff salary now, the allocation rate there is going to be based on the number of people making use of, I don't know, making use of what, but it's given the number of people making use of the facility. So in the same manner, you total this up, right? Then you take your 12,000, which is the portion for the conference, you divide by the total, and then you multiply by the fixed overheads. It gives you the portion for conference. 1,200 divided by, okay, it's not one, sorry, it's 7,500 divided by the total, and then you are multiplying again by that amount. And then 10,500 divided by the total, you're multiplying by that amount. So that's what you basically do with everything. That's what you basically do. So in the end, this is what I had there. So I had everything listed up there. So the question could have asked you anything. Like they could ask you, what's the total fixed overheads allocated to the conference? So you just go to your total there. Hotel, that's the total, that's the total. General overheads for hotel is your 900,000 likewise. So they can basically ask you anything there. But this is particularly suitable for an assignment 2 question or an examination where you can want to show all your working, you put through everything there. Right. So in terms of showing your workings, yeah, I didn't really show quite a lot of workings, but the most appropriate thing to do there is to say we want to get the 750,000, the conference for general overheads. So we would basically come there. The portion for general overheads is 15,000. So 15,000 divided by 60,000 multiplied by 3 million. That's how you'd basically present that, right? That's how you would basically want to present that. But I didn't get any complaints on this question, so I think it was fairly easy. But take note of these situations here where there are 20 working days in July. Advertisements were placed on the second working day of the conference. So every second working day, it means that the number of days would be 20 divided by 2, right? For the other one was the fifth working day, then it's going to be 20 divided by 5. Then the other one was 10th, so that's going to be 20 divided by 10. So you just need to check all that there. So I believe the next questions were based on that. So the answers are pretty much all there. All right, and then maybe here now, when it comes to the activity rate for general overheads there, I think it was the last part there, the activity rate for general overheads. So these are all the overheads. So to get an activity rate is pretty much the same as how you get your overhead absorption rate. So it's going to be the total overheads, which is in that particular line, general overheads, and then you divide that by the total level of activity. So the total level of activity was 60,000, and the total overheads was 3 million. So 3 million divided by 60,000 would give you your 50, right? So this goes on to say another way of presenting this again would be you can find your level, your activity rate, which is going to be your 50. There, this is for general overheads. Then to get your portion that goes to the first one here, the first one was conference. You can then say, basically calculate 50 times 15,000, it will still give you 750. 50 times 18,000 will give you 900,000. 50 times 27,000 will give you 1350. So it just goes with which one you are more comfortable with, right? All right, which of the following statements is true, right? The correlation coefficient R indicates how well variables are correlated. So correlation speaks of the direction, right? The direction, so it can either be positive or negative, right? And it also speaks, of course, of the strength, right? The strength of that correlation, right? So you've got your Y and your X. So you are basically trying to see if your Y moves in a certain direction. So if your X moves in a certain direction, what happens to your Y, right? That's what you are basically looking at there. So the measure with which now you use to check your correlation is what we call the correlation coefficient. I doubt you'll be asked to calculate this, right? Even in econometrics, I don't think they calculate this. It's undergrad. Statistics, yes, you will be calculating this, right? Then there is a negative correlation between the kilowatt of electricity used in a month and the monthly electricity bill. So a negative correlation means these variables are moving in opposite directions, right? So it means when one increases, the other decreases. So which is not possible to have a negative correlation in terms of your kilowatt of electricity and the bill. So we expect a positive correlation that when the kilowatts increase, the bill is supposed to increase. So that should signify a positive correlation there. So which made be wrong. Standard deviation is a statistical tool used to quantify the extent to which the spread of possible outcomes within the group differs from the mean value of the group. So this is used also a lot in finance, the spread. So the spread, they say, yeah, they use spread. Yeah, the spread or the standard deviation basically can be used to show us the risk, right? Can be used basically to show us the risk on someone is disturbing now. Sorry about that. Sorry, I'm in class. We'll call back. All right, so I was saying it basically shows risk, right? So your mean there will be representative. Mean is average, right? Mean is average. So particularly if you're doing MAC 3761, you will maybe come across this or this explanation. So if your mean is average and we are talking of returns in finance, so we are saying the average return of an investment is the mean. So standard deviation shows the extent to which the spread of possible. So in other words, it shows you how some outcomes can differ from the average. You see how the outcomes can differ from the average. So if the standard deviation is very big, it means that your values are spread they are spread away from the mean, right? So which means there's a lot of risk that your outcome could really be different from the mean. That's what that basically measures there. Right. And then the coefficient of determination 0.96 indicates that 96% of the change in the monthly bill can be accounted by the kilowatt of electricity. So this is basically called R squared. They refer to that as R squared, the coefficient of determination. So while your R basically gives us the correlation, coefficient of determination shows how much of a change in a certain variable can be explained by the other variable. So if it's too low, it basically shows that there's no like the changes cannot really be explained. So which is the changes in Y cannot really be explained by changes in X, right? So it means X can be changing while Y is changing on its own, right? So meaning Y is most likely influenced by something else, right, other than X. But you don't really need to know much detail of this, right? You don't need to. If you are doing econometrics, then we'll meet in the econometrics class for that. We go big on that one. All right. Now, okay, we were on question 8. Now we jump to question number 9. Let's see what the requirement was. The joint costs allocated to the joint products as reflected in the actual statement of profit or loss. But I will check again. I believe I have a video on joint costs, joint and byproducts. But it's a very, very simple topic. It doesn't even need a huge video. The trick with joint costs, first of all, we have to define what happens or what's the condition for us to end up having joint costs anyway. So all that is described when we talk of joint and byproducts. So what are joint products? So joint products are products that can't be separated or can't be distinguished from each other up to a certain point, which we call the split off point. So a good example that you will get maybe in your textbooks will be, say, diesel, petrol, paraffin, those ones. So they both come from what we call a joint process, right? So which means up to a certain level, you can't really distinguish petrol, diesel, and paraffin from each other. So which means they basically all come from crude oil, and then they are put into one process. Then at a later stage, when you get to the split off point, you then separate between those products. So once those products are significant enough, we refer to those as joint products, right? If you are basically going through the process to have those products, then those products, the outcome is joint products, right? So for instance, if you are doing that to get your petrol and your diesel, so petrol and diesel become joint products. And then maybe paraffin becomes a byproduct because it's incidental in the production process. So you don't really go and drill for oil just to get paraffin, right? Paraffin is very cheap, right? But you would drill for diesel and petrol. So we'll refer to those as joint products, right? So which means if joint products are going through the same joint process, it means that the costs that are incurred are called joint costs, right? They are called joint costs. So which means these costs are basically shared between those products, right? So we call those total joint costs. So you can't say this part of drilling is for petrol, this part of drilling is for diesel. You can't really say that. It's all in one process, right? So what we need to decide now is how much of those joint costs are we allocating to diesel? How much of those joint costs are we allocating to petrol, right? And then first and foremost, again, we need to know how much are the joint costs. So we need to be able to calculate or to identify these joint costs, right? So how much are the joint costs allocated to joint products as reflected? So take note that joint costs are only allocated to joint products. You don't allocate joint costs to byproducts, right? How do you identify byproducts? Byproducts will either have a very small selling price compared to the other products, or will have small units compared to the other products. So you are looking at those two then. And then most importantly, they will most likely mention that the product is incidental in the production process. So once they say it's incidental in the production process, then you know it's a byproduct. If you are a farmer and you are dealing with chickens, for instance, a chicken is a chicken, right? But it gets to a point now where you need to slaughter the chicken and then make parts for it, which are, I'll say, body parts. I know it's not the right word, but body parts. So you cut it into drumsticks, etc. You know these days that they will sell you a huge sack full of drumsticks, a huge sack full of what you call these things, wings. You see, maybe you are a farmer that's supplying KFC, right, for them to cook their zinger wings. So you'll obviously sell them a bunch of thighs, you sell them a bunch of, wings. So thighs and wings will become joint products, right? You are farming those chickens for thighs, wings. There's also there's the breast, right? Those portions. So you are farming for that. So what would become a byproduct would be the offals, the feathers. You know, feathers, you can make pillows. They use those feathers to make pillows. So that would become a byproduct. You can't say you are raising chickens for their feathers. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right. So feathers just become a byproduct. But this is always circumstantial, right? You look at sheep, for instance, you could farm sheep for their wool. You see, so it depends with the scenario, right? It depends with the scenario. So this is just so you don't become one, don't just think with blinkers. Know that in reality, there are different circumstances. So just because it's feathers, I assume that most of the time it's a byproduct, right? But with sheep, sometimes it's not a byproduct. Let's look at cattle. Sometimes cattle can be, you could farm cattle for its, I don't know, but I believe you could farm cattle for it for the leather, right? But again, it could be, it depends with the farmer, right? And the type of breed that you are dealing with. All right, but most importantly, back to our question here, total joint costs are only going to be allocated to joint products. So you don't allocate them to byproducts. How do you deal with byproducts? Byproducts, you basically take the selling price minus all the costs that you incur on that byproduct, obviously excluding joint costs, right? Obviously excluding joint costs because you don't allocate them. How to allocate them? So you take the total revenue minus the total costs, and then you take that there, and then you use that to offset you basically use that to offset your total costs, your total joint costs. Then what remains there is going to be the total joint cost to be allocated to joint products. So let's have a look and see how we did it here. All right, so the total joint production here was 2,800 plus 4,200 and then plus 500. So this was the total in terms of units, right? That's what we expect to get. So this is just to see how much of what we bought, etc. So Why did we do that? Let me just go back and show you on this one here. Raw material X purchase price was 100 rand per liter, right? And then the processing of raw material X occurs in batches of 250 liters per batch at 2.75 hours per batch. The related conversion costs are 3,500 per hour, right? So because this is given in terms of 250s there, 250 liters, and then we are also given the batches per hour, and then the raw materials. Then we necessarily now had to find the cost of raw material that was purchased, right? So we can't exclude at this point the byproduct, because whatever the case is, whatever we purchased must have been used also by the byproduct. So which means at that point, we needed first to find out the number of liters that went into the process, into the whole process, the total number of liters. So that was hence the addition. So we want to know basically the liters per batch, right? So that we can get the cost per batch. Sorry, the price per liter, right? So that we can know the total price that is going to be allocated for all these liters there. All right, so this is what we had, 7,500 liters for everything. Hence, we know that the liter is 100 rand. So 100 rand times 7,500 gave us that amount there. So this is where that 750,000 was coming from. And then for the conversion costs, this is where this issue of batches come in, right? The related conversion cost is 3,500 per hour. So we need to know how many hours are incurred on these here, or how many hours are used up on these. So we again take the total, which is going to be 2,800 plus 4, 200 plus 500. We did the total there. And then we know that each batch has 250 liters. So hence we're dividing there by 250 there, right? And then each batch takes 2.75, right, per batch at 2.75 hours per batch, right? So which means the answer that we get there times 2.75 and then time will basically give us the number of hours in dealing with all the batches that are involved. So this one here gives us the number of batches, and then each batch takes 2.75. We multiply the 2, we get the total, right, hours for all the batches, and then we multiply by 3,500, which is the cost per hour. So this is where that 288,750 came from, right? And then factory space is rented for the entire financial year at 750,000 per month, right? So this is where you get there, that 750,000 there. All right. And then let me see if there's anything left out. So the reason why this 75,000 here is not multiplied by 12 is because this information given here is also for 1 month. So you need to watch out for that. The next time, if it's for a year, make sure that you take that 75,000 and multiply by 12, right? So why did we leave out this 50,000 here? Right, that 50,000 is left out because it's not a manufacturing cost. So we are dealing with joint production costs, right? So that one is a non-manufacturing cost there. So you leave that one out. And then the part that I was talking about now, so you have the total of these. So if you do not have any byproduct, then this is where you stop. You leave it at that. But we have a byproduct, so you basically fetch all the expenses that are incurred there by the byproduct. So 70 is the selling price there. So it's 70 times the liters that we have at split off point. So what is split off point? We said split off point is where A, B, and V are now identifiable. They are now separable, right? You can now see that this is product A, this one is B, this one is C. So it's V. Right. So 70 times 500 is the revenue, right? And then in 500 times 0.5 there is basically going to give you the selling cost, right? This is per liter. These are the number of liters there. And then there's another one, the packaging there is 10 Rand per liter. Then it's going to be 10 Rand times that one there, right? And then take note there, I should have written 500 then. It's not 50. It's supposed to be 500. So 0.5 times 500. So you just offset that. Then it's going to give you the joint costs there. Right. Then there are basically, I think we normally deal with, there are 4 methods that you can use to allocate these joint costs between joint products. So physical measures is the common one, but you can also use the selling price. And then you can also use the net realizable value. I think we had net realizable value here. And then there's, I believe, the constant growth, sorry, constant, what you call it, is the constant gross profit method. See, I almost said constant growth method. Is the constant gross profit method. I think we'll look into that one much later. But this one here, the first one was based on physical standards method. So with physical standards, it's simple. A huge mistake that you could make here is to include your byproduct. So at that point, totally ignore the byproduct and then use these two here. So how do you go about that? Same way that we're doing ABC. You first add these two, you get the total, then it's going to be 2,800 divided by the total, and then you multiply by the joint products. So this is basically, that's what we did there. So we first got the total, it was 7,000. Then 2,800 divided by 7,000 gave us 600. So to get the other one would be 4,200 divided by 7,000. That's how you would get the other one. All right. And then I'm almost done. I'll be done, I think, in the next 5 minutes. The total gross profit for product A, right? So which means the actual joint costs allocated to A, we assume it's 500,000, right? So which means ideally you would have done that calculation and then suppose you got 500,000. How do you treat that there? So it's your sales less your cost of sales. So your cost of sales is going to have, this is not joint, it's supposed to be joint. Né? Joint costs allocated to product A, it's your 500,000, but then we need to incorporate further costs there. So further processing costs are the costs that you incur, still production costs, but you incur those costs after split off point. So you already know that these costs are specifically for diesel, right? These ones are for petrol. For example, petrol, in some countries, petrol, they blend it with, I can't remember what that thing is now. A certain liquid that comes from, flammable liquid that comes from sugarcane. They blend it with that. But that specifically applies to petrol. So that would be an example of a further processing cost on the petrol, right? Maybe some of it needs to be further refined. Think of sugar, for instance. Sugar can be brown or it can be white. And then there are also shades of white, I guess. I don't know, but I believe so. Some is fine. Maybe for icing, I think they call it icing sugar or something. You see, so I said this to say this. So some products need to be further processed even after split off point. Though now you can identify that this is sugar, this is molasses. Some sugar needs to be processed further to become white sugar, you see. So these are the joint processing costs there. So if you deduct that, you get your 592, which is your gross profit there. And then what about joint costs now allocated to B based on the net realizable value? So net realizable value is what you can basically fetch out of the product after all has been said and done, right? Of course, we are not taking into consideration the joint costs themselves. So it's basically your selling price, right? Less your further processing costs, and then less your, maybe these are selling costs, right? These are selling costs. So basically every other cost that you incur to get this product to sell, you deduct that, and then you come up with your net realizable value. So these are the amounts there. So likewise, you get the total, and then we want it for product B, so it's going to be 1976 divided by 3040 times the total, assuming the joint product total there cost is 1,500,000. So that's basically what you do. Right. So okay, let me go to question 13, since it's 13 past 8 now. What a coincidence. All right, so the following statements are true. When a group of individual products is produced, each product has a significant relative sales value. The outputs are usually called joint products, right? All right, relative sales. All right, so this one here, right? When a group of when we're dealing with when a group of individual products that are produced, and each product has a significant relative sales value, the outputs are usually called joint products. All right, let me just recheck what was going on that question. I think we're on question 13, right? Oh, okay, that's fine. All right, that's okay. I think we'll work on it from here. And then part B was byproducts are those products that result incidentally from producing the main joint product. So we're talking about this anyway. And then C, byproducts usually influence the decision as to whether or not to buy the main product, sorry, to produce the main product. And then joint and byproducts are identifiable as different individual products at split off point there. All right, so we know that D is correct, right? We know that D there is correct. And then, but if you look at C, C is definitely wrong, right? C is definitely wrong. So every option that has got C, you rule it out. So which means the only option that you would have there is your B and your D. So which is why I specifically came down, because if you read the first one here, when a group of individual products is produced and each product has a significant relative sales value, the products are usually called joint products. So part A, this one here is also correct, but we only didn't choose it here because it didn't have a perfect combination. So wherever there is A, there is C, you see. Wherever there is A, there is C. So hence when I was shading here, I put B and D for the sake of the options that we are given there. And that's why, but A is correct, right? A is correct. Because normally, I think I mentioned this again earlier, that you look at the sales value, right? They should, you know, be within the same range, right? Once it's too low, then you know it's a byproduct. And then a byproduct, like I was saying, you don't say you want to go and farm chickens because of feathers. It's unlikely, right? It's highly unlikely. And then I wanted to mention something before we close. Where was I? I think we're here. Now I have forgotten. Oh, all right. So the other method, the last method would have been making use of the sales value, right? Making use of the sales value. So with the sales value, you basically take the number of units times the sales, number of units times the sales, and then you repeat what we did there. It's just the same. So one thing that I would like you to check out now is under what circumstances is each method suitable, right? So in other words, when to use the physical measures, when to use the NRV, when to use the sales method. So when we meet next time, the sales value method. So when we meet next time, we are going to be starting off from there. I think we'll basically would have covered this whole section. All right.